So I would like to introduce Stuart Warburton, who is Coalville history buff. I mean, he's the best person to speak to about anything to do with history in Coalville. So you're very honoured, and we're very honoured to have him.
Thank you. Thanks, Deana. As Deana said, my name's Stuart Warburton. I am a retired museum curator. I don't originate originally from Coalville. I came from Lancashire, a small textile town in Lancashire, very similar to Coalville, only we made cotton and Coalville dug coal. I came to Coalville 33 years ago as the first curator at Snibston Discovery Museum. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you about 40 minutes or so, 45 minutes or so, a quick, brief history of Coalville. I'm not going to bore the pants off you. And then after that, if there's any questions you've got about the history of Coalville or where you think we're going to, then we can have a sort of open debate and open discussion about that. I'm currently the secretary of the Coalville Heritage Society, and the Coalville Heritage Society is effectively an archive. We collect photographs, oral history tapes, documents about Coalville, but we don't collect objects because we leave that to the museum service. Although the museum is gone, there is still a very strong museum service, so they're very good at that, so there's no reason why we should compete with them. But I'm also the secretary to the Snibston Heritage Trust. Now, as you're all probably aware, Snibston Museum is gone and it isn't coming back. But what the trust is going to do is open the colliery buildings so that you can have an experience of what it was like in a coal mine on the surface, because you can't go underground anymore at Snibston. And our long-term objective is to create a heritage centre in the town where we can tell the story, the past, present and future story of Coalville and the surrounding areas, Uttlescote, Rivenston and so on. So without further ado, I'm going to now try and manoeuvre myself around technology and bring up a series of slides, because it's much better looking at old pictures of Coalville than looking at me. So bear with me a second. First thing to think about Coalville is that before 1834, Coalville didn't exist. There was no town here. It was known as Long Lane. And it was known as Long Lane because, you can't quite see it, there is, running through here, underneath everybody's faces, is Long Lane. That is Coalville. I'm trying to show you on this one. So that road there is Long Lane. So Coalville just didn't exist. It was made up of 4 parishes. There was Ravenston Parish. Sorry, that's wrong. There was Snibston Parish, there was Uttlescote Parish, there was Swannington Parish, and there was Whittick Parish. And all those parishes joined at what is today the Clock Tower. So if you're walking up High Street and you walk down towards the Morrison's supermarket, that's in Whittick. If you walk down Beaver Road and you go into the precinct, the Beaver Centre, that's in Huddlescote. And if you go to Snibston Colliery Park, that's in Snibston. And if you go to the Post Office Collection Centre for collecting post, that's in Swannington. So that shows you that exactly that Coalville didn't exist, but it was part of 4 other places. And it didn't even have a turnpike road. We didn't have any roads. We had a lane. It was Long Lane. The turnpike road runs from Barden, from the roundabout at Barden Hill, down to Uttlescote, to the crossroads at Uttlescote, and then on to Ashby, along the Ashburton Road. I don't know if you know that road. And that's why it's called Ashburton Road. It was the Ashby to Burton Turnpike Road. So consequently, Coalville was a little bit of a backwater. It was just agricultural. There was no industry here. There was no coal mines here. It was just farming. And this shows you, this is Long Lane. There. Here we've got the Red House, and that's the clock tower there, Mantle Lane. So there you've got Swannington Parish, Whittick Parish, Huddlescote Parish, and Snibston Parish, all meeting at this crossroads here. And here you've got the Ashburton Road, which is the Leicester to Burton Turnpike Road of, I think, 1753. Now, although this is the Turnpike Road, this was the lane, this would have still been used by traders, farmers and travellers, but it was a lane, it wasn't a proper road. The oldest building still standing in Coalville is the Red House. You all know what the Red House is. It's this building here, the white building by the side of the clock tower. And the Red House has become quite iconic recently, is that we never quite realised how old it was, and we've been doing some work to help the new owner with understanding the history of the building. And we've found that the building actually dates back to about 1740, 1750. So when I say Coalville didn't exist, that's correct, but it doesn't mean there wasn't buildings here. And the Red House was called a Red House for one reason: it was made of brick. And at that time, any building in the 1740s, 1750s that were made of brick tended to be called a red house because it looked red. And the area itself became known as the Red House. So you were on Long Lane and you were going to the Red House. So the Red House has been there. It was originally built as a farmhouse. And then by 1799, it's a pub. And we only know that it's a pub in 1799 because the landlord is shot. A horse thief knocked on his door. When the landlord opened the door, the horse thief shot him and stole his horses. And that's the only reason we know it was a pub in 1799. It also had another macabre story. In the 1850s, it became known as the cradle to coffin, because apparently, or allegedly, one of the landlords, his wife, ran away with another bloke and left him, but also left their baby, who was only a few months old. So the story goes, the landlord killed the baby and buried it in the backyard. Now, when the work was being done on the Red House, we were hoping they'd dig the yard up so we could see if there's any truth to this story or not. But it became for a long time. It was known as the cradle to coffin. So anyway, we'll move on to the more facts now, rather than local legends. So the Red House is, and this is the sort of centre of Coalville, there's the clock tower. The Red House is there, and you've got Mantle Lane, which is the lane down to Whittick. You can't see it here, but you've got the lane running up there, which is the High Street, and that goes to Barden. And then here you've got Beaver Road that goes down to Huddlescote, and here you've got Ashby Road that goes to Ashby. And I just want to read you this, because this is a reminiscence of a man who came to Coalville in 1832 to work at Snibston Colliery, which we'll come back to. And this is his reminiscence. I will ask you, readers, to come in imagination and stand with me at the four crossroads in front of the Red House. The site of Mr. Radford and other joiners' shops was covered by a large pond. Sorry, this is the Red House site. So there's the Red House. These are the stables and cottages at the back. That's the large pond that he's talking about. And many days sliding did we afford, me and my friends. So in winter, when it was frozen, it was used as a skating rink. As we stand with our faces towards Ashby, so we're looking down here, down Ashby Road, we see a large tract of waste on both sides of the road, still traceable, covered with gorse bushes, blackberries and brambles, etc., with not a single house on either side of the way, and colliery number 2, Snibston, not yet sunk. The first house in that direction is was Who Ash Toll House, which is the house on the roundabout at the end of Ashby Road. Looking towards Huddlescote, so now we're looking down Beaver Road, so we're looking this way, we see a magnificent timbered lane without a single house, with the exception of Whiteley's Farm and the Gate Inn on Ashby Turnpike. The Gate Inn is still there. Whiteley's Farm is now where James Street car park is on Beaver Road. Looking down Whittick Lane, this is Whittick Lane, which is now Mantle Lane. we see a blacksmith shop, a carpenter's shop, saw pits and houses for the head carpenter and head blacksmith, which stood on the site of the Snibston offices, now Messrs Staplefords and Co. And this is what this, oh, where's my cursor gone? This is the area we're talking about here. We'll come back to that in a moment. Now let's take a look towards Barden. So we're now looking up High Street and Hotel Street. Only erections were 5 or 6 cottages near the town pump. The town pump is where the council offices are today. Occupied by Whittick Colliery employees and built somewhere between the years 1828. Until you get to the property now owned by Mr. Robinson, there are 4 or 5 further cottages, and these are known as the Fox and Goose. So that gives you an idea of what Coalville looked like in 1832. It was effectively full of brambles, blackberries, bushes, trees, farm fields, and a few dotted cottages. So coming back to these 2 plans, as I said, that is the extent of the Red House, and these were known as the Red House Courts. So there was a series of cottages at the back of the Red House. These were houses. This plan dates from the 1840s. So these are some of the earliest houses being built in Coalville, and these were built by the railway company, which again we'll come back to. And that blow up is this section here. And the reason I put this plan in is to show you this. You remember Mr. Fisher, who wrote that account, Samuel Fisher, mentioned a sawmill and a blacksmith shop. Well, this is the sawmill and the blacksmith shop here. And this is Snibston number 1 colliery. There were 2 Snibston collieries. The one that you remember is Snibston number 2. This was Snibston number 1. And you can see the pits. Those are the shafts there and another shaft there. So there were 3 shafts, and that is in this area here. In fact, on this photograph, there's one remaining building there that was this building here that was the winding house for the colliery, but that's all been pulled down now. So you've got effectively farmland. There's a pub standing at the crossroads, the Red House, originally a farmhouse. That is catering, now it's a pub, it's catering to farmers who are driving cattle. It's catering to travellers who are avoiding paying toll fees, so they're coming down the lane. And it's also providing refreshments for people transporting coal. Although there are no coal mines in Coalville, there were coal mines in Swannington and Colorton and that area of that locality. But the coal was extremely expensive because the coal mines in Leicestershire, Colorton, Swannington area, to get the coal to market, which was effectively Leicester, you had to use pack horses, long trains of pack horses, and each pack horse would have 2 panniers full of coal that the coal was then taken to market. It wasn't economical. Consequently, people in Leicester could buy Nottinghamshire coal cheaper than they could buy Leicestershire coal because there was rivers connecting Nottingham and Leicester. So something had to be done. And the first coal mine to be dug in Leicester was, we're not entirely certain when, it was anywhere between 1825 and 1828, and it was sunk by this man called William Stenson. And Stenson sank Whittick Colliery. It's called Whittick Colliery because there was no Coalville, but it's in Coalville. It was in the parish of Whittick, and it stood where Morrison's supermarket is today. So that was the Whittick Colliery site. And that photograph shows you what the colliery looked like. It was very simple: a winding house, a headstocks. This is the cage that the miners rode in to go down the shaft. So that's how basic and dangerous it was. I've put these 2 photographs in because you see there's a lot of people on the pit top. Well, I just digress for a second. In 1898, there was only ever one mining disaster in Leicestershire, and that was at Whittick Colliery when 35 men were killed because of an underground fire. And of those 35 men, 12 of them are still buried underground. They couldn't actually get them out. And what we are working on at the moment with David Wilson Homes is a big new housing development being built in Huddlescote, because the disaster didn't happen at Morrison's. The disaster happened at Huddlescote, where the coal faces were. So we're planning to build a monument to those 12 men who are still left underground at Huddlescote. Anyway, back to how Whittick Colliery developed. Stenson sank the pit, and he needed to get his coal to market cheaply. He was using pack horses to begin with. There's no canals in the area, or no successful canals. There was a canal, but that's for another story. And that was I've forgotten the name of it.
Is it Charnwood?
Charnwood, thanks Deana. That was the Charnwood Canal. So what Stenson did is, he spoke to this gentleman. That's Stenson. This is I've forgotten his name. I'm terrible with names, as you've probably just realised. John Ellis. Thank you. It was a Christian name I couldn't remember. John, and I feel terrible because I used to be the curator at Belgrave Hall where John Ellis lived. John Ellis was a local businessman, and Stenson approached John Ellis to get together a partnership to raise money to build a railway. And as you can see behind John Ellis, there's a railway, and that's the Leicester and Swannington Railway. And what they started raising the money. This is 1829. They got permission of Parliament to build a railway, but they didn't have anybody to build it. So John Ellis went to Manchester and Liverpool to see George Stephenson, who at that time was building the Liverpool to Manchester Railway. And they asked George and Robert is his son, if they would come to Leicestershire and build the Leicester and Swannington Railway. Now, George is a fantastic character. I'm intrigued by George Stephenson because he was a Durham miner. He came from Northumberland. He couldn't read and write until the age of about 30, but he was a brilliant engineer. Robert, on the other hand, when he was born in 1805, George sent him to school, and Robert became both educated and an engineer. And it was Robert that taught his dad how to read and write. His father started building railways. He can be called the father of railways, but he's not the father of steam engines. Steam engines were around a lot longer before George even started toying with the idea of steam engines. But he was a good engineer. Now, the problem with George is that he was overworked. The amount of work he was getting was phenomenal. So he suggested to Stenson and Ellis that yes, he would come and build his railway, but he wanted Robert to build it, not George. Now, Stenson and Ellis were a little bit aware of this because Robert at this time was only 24. So they were concerned that he didn't have the experience to build a railway. He did. He was an incredible engineer. So what George said is that he would come and live in the area. He lived at Alton Grange between Coalville and Ashby to oversee Robert's work. And so the contract was issued. And Robert built the Leicester and Swannington Railway. Now, at that time, we're talking now between 1830 and 1833 when the railway was built. Coalville, or what became Coalville, had a railway before London, before Birmingham, before New York, before Paris. It was one of the first steam railways in the world. So in 1830s, Coalville was at the pointy end of technology. We were the white heat of technology in this town, and people flocked from miles to see a railway. And the railway ran from Swannington, because remember I mentioned there were coal mines in Swannington. So the coal would come along the Culloden Railway, which was horse-drawn. It would come into Swannington. It would then go up the Swannington Incline into Coalville. And at Coalville, it would be attached to a steam locomotive, and it would then take the coal Barden, Bagworth, Desford, Ratbit, Glenfield, because this blue line was an extension. So this is the original railway down to Westbridge, which is just on the edge of Leicester now. It's near, I'm just trying to think where it's near. It's near to the Lewis's department store and the cinema. Is it the View? Oh no, not the View. Anyway, one of the cinemas down there. And that is the earliest illustration of what Coalville looked like in 1833. So once the railway was there, then it was suddenly cost effective to get your coal into Leicester, and from Leicester it could then go on canal and river to other markets. Now whilst George is here, George isn't heavily involved in building the railway, but he decided to get a slice of the action. So he bought 500 acres of Snibston's estate to sink 2 coal mines. Snibston number 1, we've shown you on that plan, and this is Snibston number 2, the site now of the museum site and the country park. I don't know if any of you are into mountain biking, but the mountain bike course at the new country park is absolutely superb. So if you're into mountain biking and you haven't been on it, give it a go. It's brilliant. Now, once Stevenson sank these 2 pits, and I won't go into the problems he had sinking them because they weren't easy pits to sink because of the geology. Once these 2 pits have been opened, so you had Snibston number 1, you had Snibston number 2, you had Whittick Colliery, that's when the town started to grow. And this is an 1835 map of Coalville. And here you've got, first of all, most significant, the first use of the word Coalville. We don't really know where it came from. There's 2 theories. I'll give you both theories and I'll tell you which one I think is the right one. One theory is that parcels and letters were sent from Leicester to the coal village. Now, I don't quite believe that one. The second theory, which I think is the right one, is that William Stenson, who had Whittick Colliery, where's my cursor gone, had a house that stood there at the town pump, roughly where the car park is at the side of the council offices. And his house was called Coalville or Coalvilla. We're not certain whether it's Coalville or Coalvilla. And we think the town took its name from Stenson's house, the Coalville. Bearing in mind at that time, ville, the use of the word ville, because you have Woodville, you had Ironville, you have Coalville, it was to make it sound posh, for want of a word to it, make it sound pretty, make it sound modern. So the word ville is French, and it gives it that the right tone. So that's where we think it came from. But by 1834, the town has got its name Coalville. But it is still not really a town. You've got Whittick Colliery here, and around Whittick Colliery, you've got the Stenson's Whittick Colony, or Whittick Settlement. And here, lost cursor again. Here you've got Snibston number 1 pit and Snibston number 2 pit, and here you've got New Snibston, which is George Stevenson's colony. So you've got 2 settlements, 2 separate colonies, which eventually join up to become one town. And you know the pub at the corner, which is the Snibston New Inn? Well, that was built in 1834, and it should have been called the New Snibston Inn. But the signwriter got it the wrong way around and called it Snibston New Inn. So that's New Snibston. By 1840, I lost my cursor again. By 1840, you start to get infill. So you start to get shops and houses being built in this area and along here. That's Whiteley's farm there. And Coalville starts to take shape. So the 2 colonies become one. And there we've got the Snibston number 1 pit again. So we've got the beginnings of Coalville. Now, once you've got this one major industry, which is coal mining, as well as associated farming, agriculture, because you need to feed the miners and you need to house the miners, you then start to get other industries that are riding on the back of the mining industry. And Coalville's got three major industries that are crucial to the development of the town. This one is, you know where the old co-op store is, Iceland store on Bridge Road in Coalville. Well, that used to be the site of an ironworks called Wootton Brothers. So that's a photo of Wootton Brothers Ironworks, because if you have got coal mines, you need iron, you need machines, you need tools. And then you've got these two photographs are Stapleford's wagon works, because if you need to move coal, you need to build wagons. So we've got a wagon works, and Stapleford's wagon works is where the Springboard Centre is today. And then this photograph, the other major industry in the town was brick making, and there were half a dozen brickworks in the centre of the town, and we're going to come back to that in a moment. So we've got engineering, brick making, wagon building, but we've also got shops. So we've got retail industry as well. And from the brick making, we have another famous man from Coalville, and this is George Smith. George Smith wasn't born in Coalville; he was born in Staffordshire, but he was a brickmaker, and he came to manage the Whittick Colliery Brickworks. And he was so proud, this is the 1870s, he was so proud of being the manager at the Whittick Colliery Brickworks that he actually, if you get bricks of that period, it says Whittick Colliery Brickworks, George Smith, manager. But the significant thing about George Smith is that he was appalled at women and children working in brickyards. Women and children up to the 1842 were working in the coal mines as well. But in the brickyards, this is 1870, and there's still, and he recorded that one child, you see a child there, and he said that a child of 9 would walk upwards of 18 miles a day with carrying lumps of wet clay on their head. And he didn't think that was right for a child of 9. He also didn't think it was right for women to be working in brickyards either. So he pushed through legislation through Parliament to ban the use of children and women in brickyards. Now that you would think is commendable. Sadly, the brickyard owners in Coalville were appalled by it, because it suddenly took half their workforce away from them. And more importantly, it took the cheap workforce away from them, because you didn't have to pay children and women as much as you had to pay men. And so they campaigned, because they used to call themselves, as you see there with that illustration, George Smith of Coalville. They actually campaigned to stop him using the word Coalville after his name, because they felt it was bringing Coalville into disrepute. He was he later went on to do the similar work for canal people working on the canals, and before he died, he was starting to do work on gypsy children as well, for laws to help gypsy children. Incredibly important character, and lived in Coalville for about 10 years. So suddenly you've got a booming town. You've got pubs. I love that photograph, because if you look closely at it, you've got this bloke here with what looks like a Stetson hat on. You know, you could almost be in the Wild West there. And that's what Coalville was like. It was like a frontier town. You know, it was the Wild West of Coalville, of Leicestershire. You've got the street starting to grow, and this is with a celebration for Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee. You start to get entertainments, and this is the Emporium, which is the nightclub. Originally, it was the dance hall. It was a public hall for dancing, and then later became the first cinema, the Electric Theatre. You then got shops selling specific things, like here we've got general store selling tea, groceries and so on, or here we've got selling horse harnesses, a bit like a modern garage. You also then start to get sports, and that's a photograph of the Snibston Colliery cricket team. and you start to get the football teams. So you get and this is where Coalville Town Football Club starts to come into the picture. So the town is starting to take shape and look like a town that we recognise. But remember I said that in the 1870s, 1880s, women were no longer allowed to work in heavy industry, brickyards, coal mines, and engineering. They never worked in engineering anyway. So there had to be employment for women because the shops couldn't cater for everybody. So Coalville then took another course, industrial course, and that was with textiles. And we had two major textile companies in the town, the biggest being Clutson and Kemp, which was on Beaver Road. And this is a photograph of Clutson and Kemp. And as you can see there, majority of the workers there are all women. And these were weavers and knitters. So they were doing narrow frame weaving, doing elastic web for shoes down in Leicester, or for braces, or for military belts and things like that. Massive factory, massive employer. And another employment of women in Coalville, we're slightly later on now, we're now into the 20th century, into the 1930s, is Palitoy. And I don't know if you're aware that Palitoy, we started in Leicester as Castleoid, and in 1937 Castleoid bought a site in Coalville and built the Palitoy factory in Coalville, and it was a toy factory, and we were the centre of toy manufacturing for the country almost. Action Man was made, Tiny Tears was made, Pippa, Tressie you may not have heard about, Care Bears were made, but more significantly to a lot of people today, it's where Star Wars toys were made. So the Millennium Falcon you can see there, the AT-ATs, all the figures, and these now go for vast amounts of money within the collector's market. But it's major toy, and the one that really put it on the map was Action Man, and that was launched in 1966 and made in Coalville. So, and that employed also a lot of women. So Coalville, and there was a nice thing about Palitoy. It got the nickname, it was a gold mine on top of a coal mine, because it was so important, it was so influential and made so much money for the town. So this is now Coalville. We start to get the town we recognise. It's not, this is a map of the no, this is 1900s, sorry, this is 1920s. And we start to get the high street. These are all gone now. Here we've got the Red House. The railway's all gone, sadly. We've got the shops here, we've got the shops along here, we've got the new streets coming in here. Marlborough Square still hasn't quite materialised. This is the co-op, what will become the co-op here. But I just wanted to bring this out to your attention. And that is now where that's where the market hall is, and the car parks, and this is the Beaver Shopping Centre. So it's a massive area of nothing in the middle of the town. This is the brickworks. So there's a massive brickworks in the centre of town. And as I mentioned, there were 6 other brickworks in the centre of the town as well. And Beaver Centre was one of the first major developments in the town. And these are the earliest photos we have of the Beaver Centre, how it was quite a pretty shopping centre with all the trees and the statue. Remember the statue that's now outside the library? That was originally in the Beaver Centre. It was known as the Precinct. And it was one of the earliest post-war shopping centres to be built in the country. And significantly, it had this statue. That's used, as we go back, that's the statue there. That net, oh, lost my cursor again. Hang on, there it is. That's the statue there, which now stands outside the library. And it's significant. Now, when I came to Coalville, I remember talking to an old miner, and I said how impressed I was that the symbol for Coalville wasn't a coal miner, wasn't an engineer, it was a woman. And I thought this was incredibly bold and forward thinking of a town that had been built on very masculine industries. The miner shot me down immediately and said, yeah, but you got to remember who's doing the shopping. And yes, he's right, because the woman's carrying a shopping bag. I don't know if you ever noticed, sadly, you can't really see it anymore because you're walking past the library, you don't see this shopping bag and the child very well. But if you look, next time you're going past, have a look. The shopping bag represents all the things that were made in Coalville. So there's a bobbin of yarn. There's a doll for Palitoy. I can't remember what else is in the shopping bag now. It's ages since I looked at it. But have a look at it next time you're going past. And it is significant to Coalville. One, it's a woman, and secondly, it's what were made here, and she's shopping for those items. We also have another statue in Coalville, as you're probably aware, which we do have at last, a statue of a miner. This was put up in the 1990s to represent the end of the collieries, because between Snibston number 1 pit closed in the 1880s, but Snibston number 2, the museum site, and Whittick Colliery, the Morrison site, they were producing coal from the 1830 right up to the 1980s. And when the pits closed, that's when Snibston became a museum and Whittick was demolished and became a shopping centre. But I've just put these two pictures in to show you what it was like to be a miner. And these two photographs are from Snibston Colliery. The coal seams were anywhere between, I'll go do this in metric now. So the coal seams were anywhere between 45 centimeters and 1.5 meters. So you can see there that these are the coal seams that this bloke is crawling down. So that coal seam is about 1 meter high. These blokes worked for 7 hours a day in that area with thousands of tons of earth above you. And at Snibston, that pit was 900 feet deep, so about 300 meters deep. So these blokes were very brave and worked damned hard to make Coalville prosperous. And as I mentioned, in the 1980s, that industry ended in Coalville. 1986 is when Whittick Colliery and Snibston Colliery finally closed. This, you can't see it very well, but this is Whittick Colliery, and that photograph is about there. So that's where one of the pits were. There were 5 pits at Whittick Colliery. That's where one of the pits was. And this, as you can see, is Snibston Colliery, and that's the Snibston Colliery here. Before it was redeveloped, that's now the mountain bike track and the country park. And this is where the museum was and the preserved coal mine. The coal mine is a scheduled ancient monument, which means it's on equal par to other scheduled monuments around the country, places like Stonehenge, or just trying to think of another one, York Minster. So it's an incredibly important site. And I'm glad you can't see that, because as you can probably guess, this was done just before the museum was pulled down, and I must update this slide because that's all now gone, sadly. And the railway is still being used. So here we have Coalville Station. That's the 1848 station. That was the original station. You know, as you're walking over the level crossing in Coalville, there's now a nursery. Well, that was the original station for the Leicester and Swannington Railway before it was converted into a pub. It was actually a pub even then. It was a pub cum station. And this was built in the 1840s. But the railway is still used. And there is talk about reopening the railway to become what's known as the Ivanhoe line. That will be fantastic for Coalville. The plus side, I don't know whether you're for or against HS2, the high-speed railway that will travel through just north of Coalville to Manchester and Leeds. They have to upgrade this railway line that you can see in the picture to get stone from Barden down to the new railway. So if they're upgrading the railway to get materials for the new railway, then it isn't much more to do than to put stations in. So maybe we will get a railway back. And I've put this one in to show you how central Coalville is. There's Coalville. And the railway's still there. It's transporting stone now predominantly and goods. But what Coalville has in its advantage now is it's at the centre of the country. So we've got good motorway connections. We have the M1, we have the A42, the M42. We're quite close in that respect to the M6 and the M5. We're close to the A1. So Coalville now has taken a new role of being a centre for distribution. So that's why we have things like Amazon here and all the other distribution warehouses at Baden. That is the reason why Coalville is still a key player in the country's economy. And the other thing that's always been a burning problem in Coalville is the market. The market originally used to be at the Red House. You can see here, all around the Red House was the market. And this is the centre, and also the Red House. I'm trying to find the Red House. There's the Red House. And also the Red House had a cattle market at the back. So it not only sold fruit and veg, it also sold cows and sheep. And that's where the precinct is. That's the field where the precinct is. That also used to have lots of circuses and fairs on it. So the big thing is, where do you put your market now? Because this is past its sell-by date, to be fair. And the council are now looking at how to relocate. And you're probably aware that they're now building a market hall on Marlborough Square, which has gone full circle, because when Marlborough Square was first laid down in the 1840s, it was also the cattle market, and it became known as the New Market. So what they're doing now with the new market hall, they're calling it the New Market, which is really where history meets itself in the circle. But what do you do with spaces like this, which used to be the market? Do you make it into a market again? Do you put events on there? It's always been underused as this area of Coalville. And, you guys are now going to be that generation that thinks of things that how can we bring life back into the centre of Coalville. I'll skirt off that one. And also we've got vast areas of dereliction in Coalville. That was the Co-op Bakery, which had a fire a few years ago. Massive building. Ideal for flats, ideal for leisure centres, ideal for many different uses, but it's derelict. Likewise, this space here, which was the Greaves Needle Factory. Remember I mentioned that Coalville was a major textile centre? Well, we also made knitting needles for machines, and the Greaves' factory was pulled down about 10 years ago. Still derelict. And the toilet block, wouldn't that make a fantastic art gallery or heritage centre? Now you can even see the sign on the at your convenience. We're moving on swiftly. So what about the future? Well, Coalville does have a heritage. It may be only be a very new town, but it's got a conservation area. This black line shows the extent of the conservation area. And through community activity and community involvement, this building isn't in the conservation area. It's the Midland Red Garage. Again, one of the earliest purpose-built motor garages in the country, because most motor garages were adapted from tram sheds. We never had trams in Coalville. So that dates from the 1920s. Snibston, not in the conservation area, but now listed and scheduled. So although that's the conservation area, it actually spans further away. So it's here and down here. And now we're working with people at the Red House. So we're trying to keep the character and the heritage of Coalville, not to stop development, but to become a catalyst to development, because developers like history and like to be able to sell shopping centres, which are going to be a thing of the past, let's be truthful, but mainly housing to new people, to say there is a heritage here, that it's not a new town, or Coalville practically is. So that really wraps up where we are with Coalville. Now I'm open to questions or comments.
Yeah, I mean, I just enjoyed that a lot. I usually don't enjoy presentations because I struggle to read things sometimes, like if it's a massive text, but that was so interesting.
Thank you.
And yeah, like the way you speak is so engaging, and the whole history. I just found it, even though it's like a small town, you could say, it's still quite interesting how it developed and how it came to be what it is today. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. I don't like words either. I'm dyslexic, so words have always been alien to me. So
yeah, me too. So
I just wanted to say, you mentioned early on, like you have like, what was it, like an archive of like documents and stuff, like historical stuff?
Yeah, with the Coalville Heritage Society, we have about 3,000 photographs of Coalville, right from the earliest photos of 1870s right through to yesterday. So, and we're just developing a website, which that will be on stream around about September, where all these photographs will be viewable. You'll be able to see exactly what we've got in the collection. It's a massive job. But in the interim, we obviously can provide those photographs for educational purposes and for projects and so on without, we do charge a license fee to, I don't remember when Wetherspoons was opened, all over Wetherspoons there are photographs of Coalville. We sold those pictures to Wetherspoons. So we do, we use that archive for commercial purposes, but for what you're doing, this is learning and education and development purposes, and we can provide, within reason, images for your project. 63. It's a bit of a quandary, is that, because technically we would like to see the precinct listed, and I think we could get it listed, but that would stop development in the town. And this is one of the quandaries that, as me as a sort of historian and a conservationist, we have to face. Where do we draw the line to stop progress and to leave things in aspect? And I think with something like the precinct, maybe is something we may have to sacrifice to keep Coalville growing and developing. I don't know what your thoughts. We have a cinema in Coalville at the Central Theatre.
Yeah,
but I don't think
that's there.
It's not working somehow. I don't know. I always hear this, we want a cinema in Coalville, and I always have to say we have a cinema, but we don't use it. But you're back onto the precinct. The thing is, if it was listed, they wouldn't be allowed to pull that section down.
Yeah.
So immediately we'd be stopping development. And it is, it's a fine line. But coming back onto the railway, it's always difficult to say the first or one of the first. But with the Leicester and Swinton Railway, you can count on the fingers of two hands the number of steam railways in the country at that time. And they're in peculiar places, not just things like Liverpool, Manchester, but there was the Whitstable and Canterbury Railway. Who's ever heard of that one anymore? There was one but they were all in country areas where there were coal mines, because that was what it was doing. Stockton, Darlington. It was to move coal. Railways were not intended for people. And that's the thing about the Leicester and Swinton Railway. The Liverpool, Manchester was started to transport people right from the get-go. The Leicester and Swinton also started to transport people from the get-go, but all the others, like the Stockton, Darlington, Canterbury, Whitstable, the Somerset one, they did not carry people. So again, Leicester and Swinton, or Coalville, was only the second railway in the country to start carrying people. It's not the country, the world, to start carrying people, because there were no other railways in the world. So that's why I'm proud of Coalville. That's why I wanted to come back here.
I'd like to bring somebody in who doesn't live in Coalville. So they've got Alex and Ben. I don't know if they want to take it in turns. If you start with whoever mutes first, because I can't see Alex, I can just see Ben. Start with Ben then. Yeah. Ben, if you want to just share a bit, because you're not been to Coalville yet, so tomorrow's your first trip, or whichever day you come in.
Yeah, I have been once, and we went on a wild goose chase to loads of different Argoses, and it's the one which is outside the chimney, and so I've only been there. As soon as I saw it on the PowerPoint, I thought, oh yes, I know where I am now. Yeah. But I think it's also a good thing I haven't been to Coalville, because one, I can learn something new. Love history. Beautiful presentation, by the way. Thanks for that. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, love history. I especially love architecture, being a photographer and all that. I find it really useful to go into a new place that you've not seen before with fresh eyes. Because sometimes if you think like living in this village, this is like about 2-3 miles out of Measham. I know this place like the back of my hand. I've lived here for what, 17 years? And as far as I know, there is nothing to photograph, nothing to film about. We've got a church, a pub, and a shop. That's
Which
it.
village are you in?
Austria.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, going in there with fresh eyes, and especially what I've learnt in these past 3 days, it is a remarkable place, and it's definitely got some hidden gems in there which needs more attention and more putting out there, pretty much.
I just wish we got our website up and running for you guys now, because you would find that archive absolutely fascinating, being a photographer. And our chairman, Steve Duckworth, is also a photographer, is a fellow of the Royal Photographic Society, and he's taking some absolutely stunning pictures of Coalville. The one on the you don't know it because you're not here, but are you walking past the hoardings?
Yes. Well, I'll make sure we do we're definitely going to go and visit the we'll go past that way, but I want to go and visit the statue.
Yeah.
So the walk actually doesn't include the actual that bit, but we'll do a diversion to make sure we pass it.
Okay. Well, Ben, on those hoardings, we have a photograph which is absolutely stunning of Coalville, and it looks, when Deana said about being in the centre of the national forest, it looks like we're in the centre of a forest. And the way Steve's photographed it is unique. He's used a long lens on a very short focal length. So it's compressed the depth of field. And the number of people that have said, that's not Coalville. That can't be Coalville. Coalville doesn't look anything like that. There's all these trees and everything. Steve was actually walking down the street when he heard a couple say, I don't know where they got that photo from. That's not Coalville. And Steve said, yes, it is, because I took it. So we do like to do photographic artwork as well. Bye all. I'll hopefully see you all sometime over the next few months when I can be liberated out of this like my cave is this now. It's become a shed. So I'll see you all hopefully soon.
If you look out the window, tomorrow, Friday and Saturday, at some point we will be wandering by.
Okay, well, I'll wave.
Okay, thanks, Stuart.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
Bye.
See you soon. All the best for your future. Bye-bye. Bye.